Hey guys, welcome back to Heart Breathings. Today, I did not have a specific video planned because I've got lots of stuff coming up for us, but I asked on Instagram what you guys would most like to hear about. And the number one choice was, let's have a chat about mental health and productivity. So that's what we're here today to do. I'm literally just gonna sit on the floor, be super casual. I have a couple notes written on a notebook, and I really wanna talk about the things I've noticed in my own life in terms of how my own mental health and my own struggles with mental health have affected my productivity and the things that I'm learning to do to get over that and to heal myself and to move forward and get as much done as I can in a super healthy way. So let's have a chat. So if you're not familiar with this channel or you're new to me, my name is Sarra Cannon. I'm an author and a mom, and I have a YouTube channel here where I talk a lot about planning and productivity for authors, but really for anybody. And I went through a period of time back in around 2015, 2016, so about 6 or 7 years ago, where I really just hit a wall. And even though my author career was successful, this was long before I had a YouTube channel, even though my author career was successful, I was in a very bad place. And it was to a point where most days I really struggled to get out of bed. I had one child at the time, and I would get him off to school, and then I would come home and I would either go back to bed for hours at a time, or I would sit on the couch just binge eating and binge watching television, usually true crime documentaries and things like that. And I kept telling myself this is just because I needed a rest. I had been working really hard. I was burned out, and I probably was burned out. This is before I really knew about burnout, but I was also in depression. And for some reason, it was my success that had triggered that depression, that there was maybe some type of upper limit problem, which Gay Hendricks talks about in his book, The Big Leap, that somehow I had reached a level of success that deep down inside myself, I did not feel I deserved. Even though I knew I had worked for it, I had earned it in every respect, there was some part of my subconscious mind that was feeling that I had hit a limit to what my success was. And so self-sabotage really started to set in for me. And I am so grateful for that period in my life, even though it was excruciating. And I went through a lot of really traumatic things, such as cutting out a lot of my family and friends that were toxic to me. It was a really difficult and traumatic time, but I am super grateful for that time in my life too, because it was really an awakening for me, because I began to open my eyes and see for the first time that I had trauma in my past that I had not dealt with yet. And this is kind of where the mental health side of things come in. So I will go ahead and just, give you guys a little bit of a warning that I am going to be talking not about anything graphic that has happened to me, but I am going to talk a little bit about trauma and mental health here today. So if that is not a topic that feels safe for you, you might want to just head off and watch the Notebook Challenge on Sunday and just skip this video because I'm going to be talking about more serious things that some of you may not be ready to hear. But if you feel like this is something you've been struggling with too, and you want to hear my story and kind of chat about it, then you are definitely welcome here. I just ask that if you guys make comments down below, keep in mind my mental health. I think a lot of times people don't understand how their comments can affect creators' mental health. So just going to put that out there as well. But what I was saying is I was grateful for this time. I have come to be grateful for this time in my life because there was a lot of healing and awakening and understanding that came out of this deep depression, because I think that I had kind of hit a crossroads, which I had hit a similar crossroad several years before that, where it's like I either am going to pick myself up and become the person I feel I was meant to be, and I'm going to work toward my goals, and I'm going to make this happen, and I'm going to figure this out, or I'm just going to give up. And there was a very strong pull for me to just give up. And I knew the danger in the pit of my stomach of what that would mean to just give up. And I did not want to. It's like that little drowning piece of me. It's like there's this big sea of give up, give up. And there was just this little me in the middle of this ocean that said, this is not who I am. I do not want to give up. I have big dreams and big things that I want to accomplish in my life, and I am not going to give up. Please do not give up. And so I basically just reached my hand up and said, who can help me? Who can help pull me out of this? And I reached for the people that were going to be there for me the most. So I had a spiritual advisor I started working with named Tanya Gonzalez. I will leave her links below because she's incredible. And I also really leaned on my husband and some of my very best friends during this time. And they helped to get me through, but there's only so much other people can do to get you through. And so I knew that what I needed to do was embark on a period of my life where I would begin really soul searching and looking at the trauma of my past and why I felt that I only deserved this much success when there was a part of me that wanted to be way up here. Like, how am I going to close this gap if I'm already in depression when I get only this far? It's kind of like a temperature or a tolerance. My life could only, or my mental health could only tolerate this much success, but my dreams wanted to get me here. So how am I going to move forward? And so I discovered the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I also went through the Desire Map by Danielle Laporte, and I did a lot of journaling during this time. And what I ended up with was my HB90 system that, if you've been here for a while, I have shown you before. And it's hard to summarize all of the deep work in therapy and other things that I went through during that period of my life. But I will say that I started to understand that the reason I had this limit for myself is because I was mentally and verbally abused and physically abused as a child. And I really had developed a low sense of self-worth. And so even though I had outward confidence in a lot of ways, I really did not believe that I deserved a lot. And so I had found ways to kind of continue to push myself towards success, even though there was some part of me that didn't feel I deserved it. And eventually I hit this limit that forced me to kind of look in a mirror and say, what's going on here? And it took years of therapy and a lot of really hard, deep inner work to start to allow myself even to get back on track to writing again, and then eventually to starting this YouTube channel and being able to show up here for you guys. And part of that was the mental health work, and part of it was the productivity, because I needed to be actually working on my work and moving forward in order to find success. Because if you are an indie author or you followed the indie life in any way, or if you're a YouTuber, pretty much anything that happens in this day and age, if you take an extended break of 3 years, your sales are going to suffer. Your momentum is going to suffer. And so I had this panic in me the whole time that I was going through this depression of like, oh my gosh, if I don't get it together and start moving forward, I'm going to lose everything I've built. So I had this idea that like, I need to be working on my mental health, but I also need to be productive. So what can I start to do to work on both of these things simultaneously? So this is where my HB90 system was developed. So I started looking into the idea of putting things on the wall. I had already always put like sticky notes and different things on the wall and realized, okay, I'm a visual person. If I have my tasks front and center right there in my face, maybe I'll be more likely to do them. So then I discovered the Kanban board, but I ended up using it top to bottom, which many of you have seen, instead of moving stickies left to right. So I adapted the Kanban to meet my space that I had in that house and to meet my own like desire and what brought me the most joy in terms of the process. So I had started to develop this, and I found a system that really allowed me to be more productive despite my mental health, or to work with my mental health. And that was this idea of knowing where I wanted to go. What's my big picture vision? And really holding on to that kind of like a lifeline. Like, I know I'm capable of this. I know this is what I want, and this is what I'm working toward. And as someone who is, if you're familiar with Becca Syme's work and the strengths, Gallup strengths, futuristic is my number one strength. So I get energy and joy by looking to the future, and not everybody's like that. But for me, having that big picture vision was something that held me to my life. Like, I am not going to give up because I want that future for myself. So that was the first. It was like a beacon of hope that I could hold on to even during the tough days. And then I decided, okay, what can I do just over the next 90 days? Pick a small amount of time that I can work, because I couldn't focus on the next year. When I was trying to focus on an entire year at once, or my next 5-year business plan, which a lot of people tell you to do, I was feeling overwhelmed, and it would start to spiral into a really negative place for me mentally, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get all this done in 5 years. And I just couldn't, even though I could hold that higher vision in my head, I couldn't hold all these tasks and the weight of all these things that needed to get done. So I started looking into 90-day planning. I kind of combined all of this into my own system called the HB90 method. And of course, back then it didn't have a name. It was just what I was using. And that allowed me to move myself forward, because even when I had really bad days where I couldn't get out of bed, there were always some low energy tasks that I could pull off the board and things that I could do and keep moving myself forward, while I was also walking this path of therapy and, talking things out. I had a best friend at the time that we used to go on writing retreats, and I would spend, 50% of the time writing and 50% of the time almost in like friendship therapy, where we would talk about our traumas and talk about the things that we've been through and really just get it all out. And it just felt so good to talk through some of those things, like, okay, maybe I'm not crazy. Maybe this was abuse as a child, and start to come up with a path forward. So I leaned really heavily on the people that were most important to me at the time, and I will forever be grateful for that. And so as time went by and I was working on both those things, my productivity through the HB90 and my mental health, I started to really understand. I had always heard people say there's a correlation between, like, if you're depressed, you're like 35% less likely to be productive, or you don't show up to work as often. And there's all this statistics and material out there, studies that have been done about depression or other mental health issues that keep people from being productive in their jobs. And I had always heard that. But when I started really looking at my Kanban board and understanding that the stickies that were still left in the to-do section of my board were really, I started tracking my days and tracking the projects and tasks that I was working on. And I started to understand that there was a direct correlation there between my mental health and my productivity. And the better my mental health was, the better I was feeling, the more happy days I had, the more I would have a 90-day quarter. Sorry, I have a 2-year-old out there. The more I would have a 90-day quarter where I had almost cleared my board. But then the quarters or the months where I had a lot of difficulty or struggle with anxiety, or I had struggle with my own mental health, or my comparisonitis or jealousy or other things that I was dealing with, or had slipped back into a place of depression, I would have so much more on my board that didn't get done. And so it was something about visually seeing that correlation of like, oh, I've really been struggling with my anxiety and look how little I was able to accomplish, that really started me thinking, okay, I'm going to have to come up with some solutions here. In the past, my solution had often been to beat myself up, and my interior mental health, like interior dialogue with myself, would go something like this. You think you want those goals? You really want to move forward in your life this way? Then you can't be lazy laying in bed. You're going to lose time. You're going to lose everything you've built, your money, your house, everything that you've built for yourself is just going to go. Everybody's mad at you. Everybody's disappointed in you. You better get yourself out of this bed and get moving. And that type of talk, which I have since learned was really the way that my mother always spoke to me when I was younger, is something that I have used to motivate myself. It's like, okay, I can force myself into a place of hustle and working harder by being mean to myself. But as with all things negative, there's only so long that that's going to serve you and move you forward. And I think that's what I was going through every time I hit this plateau of, once I get this level of success, the depression comes back in full force, is because I have pushed myself to that level rather than gotten there with ease and flow and by loving myself and loving what I'm doing. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't love myself to some degree and on some days. And that doesn't mean that I don't love the work that I do in the world, because I totally do. But it just means that mental health is nuanced and it's complicated. And you can have one day where you feel like you're on top of the world and another day where you feel like you're just not even sure how you're going to continue to move forward. And despite all the success that I've had, I have also had a lot of trauma in my life. And we won't go through all of that. I have another video where I do kind of talk about that, but not only trauma in childhood, but a severe trauma and attack when I was in my early 20s. And then also losing everything I owned to 2 separate house fires. That kind of stuff is trauma. And then all the little traumas that we all face, in everyday life. And those things, even if it happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago, are still things that I come up against on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and I have to find a way to carry myself through. And so I had found a way of being so mean to myself and so hard and strict on myself that I would force myself into action, right? And that just doesn't really work anymore. And I still find myself falling into those old patterns. But I wanted to not only kind of share some of my story here, but also tell you some of the things that I've been doing that have helped. I have been through several years of where we lived near the beach and high productivity years. I got pregnant. I had lost 40 pounds. Everything was going so well. But then because of that success, just a few years ago when I had Evie, I think I also started to fall into more of those days of high anxiety, because even though I've lifted myself from 2016, I was able to raise the bar on my own self-appointed or self-allowed limit of success. I have now hit another ceiling, and I've really struggled with anxiety this last year more than I have, in the previous years. And I'm finding ways to deal with it, and being settled in a new house is very helpful. And I am ready to work on it in a healthier way. So I wanted to just kind of tell you that story, talk about it for those of you that have felt similar types of struggles, because I think a lot of times we can see other people being really productive, and then we can look at ourselves and judge ourselves on that and say, what's wrong with me? Why am I not? If you don't get out of this, you're never going to see your dreams come true and things like that. And I think that we have to learn to understand that even if you see me and think that I'm super productive, the truth is that I also really struggle a lot of days. And the only reason that I'm as productive as I am is because I'm either really working on these things that I'm going to talk about right now and have worked for a long time on trying to get my mental health to a better state. And I also have a plan and a way that really works for me and for my brain to help me continue to move forward even on low energy days. But also that there are days that you guys don't see where I still struggle really hard with my mental health and giving up. And of course, most creators don't show that, but I think most of us go through it. And it's just another reminder there that when you're commenting on any creator who is putting themselves out there to hopefully give information back to you, please be kind in the comments. Even if you have some kind of criticism or you disagree with where they go to eat lunch or, whatever else, think about how you can be kind to them, because you never know where someone's mental health is at the time. Just a little PSA there. But I do have some notes kind of about this. I'm already talking longer than I intended. But so the happier I am and the better my mood and the better my energy, the more productive I am and the more I can get done in a joyful way. However, some of my productivity, like I was talking about, is fueled by fear. So I have traditionally fueled my productivity by thinking about how I'm getting too old. I'm going to run out of time. Everybody else is so far ahead of me. I'm falling way behind. I'm losing momentum. And that panic starts to push me into high productivity, but in a way that's not sustainable, because I'm pushing myself, forcing myself into it. But that has, like I said, served me some in the past. And even now, I still struggle on those days where I look at my book sales and I think about the fact that they're lower now than they have been in years, because I've been focused so much on heart breathings. And so then the panic starts to set in, and then I try to force myself into creativity. but like really forcing yourself into creativity with fear is not really going to be as helpful as easily joining your creativity because you're happy and you're excited to do the work. So then certain behaviors trigger this type of panic in me. So there are behaviors that correlate with my mental health. So for example, scrolling through Instagram for a long period of time, I'm eventually going to see someone who is outperforming me, someone who disagrees with me, someone who says the kind of things that I'm doing are downright wrong, or someone who is doing so incredibly well that it makes me feel like I'm never going to get there. And that triggers those old feelings of not being enough and low self-worth. And, so that's one. Looking at my book sales these days is another. And it's like, logically, I know that it's just because I haven't been writing books. Like if you want your sales to go up, you got to write books, right? I've been so focused on teaching and I know I do that well and I know I'm making an impact, but I also have kind of fallen off the wagon when it comes to promoting and working through my own books. So it's like I logically know why the sales are low, but they still can bring me into a panic situation. Looking at the bestseller lists or going into bookstores and seeing other people's deals or other things like that. Like I know that we're not supposed to compare ourselves and jealousy is a bad emotion, but it still triggers me sometimes. It still gets its hooks in me sometimes. And I might be ashamed to admit it, but it's the truth. And so I have gotten so much better about it than I used to be, say 5 or 6 years ago. But sometimes if I'm already in a bad place and then I find myself doom scrolling or going and looking at somebody else's accomplishments, and then that gets paired with the negative thoughts of you're no good, you're not going anywhere, you're running out of time, that can really get me into a negative spiral. And sometimes I can lose an entire week of writing or more because of those types of behaviors and mental health struggles. So obviously I have been working on this. I have been working on, taking myself out of those situations where I might struggle. When I see someone succeed, I've been telling myself that could be me someday. I'm so proud of them, and really turning around that jealousy into excitement of like seeing it as a sign that it is possible and I'm not going to give up. So working to kind of reframe and imagine some of that jealousy has been super helpful for me. Also, being aware of when I'm doing it and when I'm starting to fall into a negative spiral, I drop it like it's a hot potato or a coal or something. I'll be like, oh my gosh, what am I doing on my phone? I'm starting to get these negative thoughts again. And it's just being aware of the thoughts and the way I'm speaking to myself in my head. And if I'm doing a behavior that's causing me to think in that way, I have to drop it. And then what I go focus on instead, what's been helping me a lot, this is a tip I got from Gabby Bernstein, is that when I'm feeling that way and I'm starting to feel low and I feel that negative self-talk come in, I turn my focus on how can I serve somebody. So I'll go onto Instagram instead. If I'm on Instagram instead, I'll go into my DMs and I'll respond nicely to someone, or I'll go answer a question in my email, or I'll go offer something else to my Publish and Thrive students. And that then gets me into a place of service where I feel valued and I know I'm providing value to someone else, rather than comparisonitis where I feel worthless. And so I've been working to change those behaviors to a degree. But then there's the catch-22 of when I am succeeding and things are going well and I'm doing a good job of keeping my mental health in a good place and I'm being productive, then it triggers this upper limit problem. So I have a low point where I'm focusing on the bad things, but then when I'm doing really well and I hit this upper limit point where I'm like, hey, things are going really well. I just had a 6-figure launch and this is going and I've got 50,000 subscribers and oh my gosh. And I start to focus on the good things. There is some insidious part of me that speaks from this childhood trauma that goes, who do you think you are? You don't deserve this. Who told you could have this kind of success? Which then begins to trigger the self-sabotage and the feelings of depression, even when it's not logical. And sometimes I can lose a couple days before I realize, oh my gosh, I had this big success and that's why I'm feeling low, because my brain has been trained to only believe I'm capable of so much. And so when I start to hit that limit, I start to sabotage myself. So in a way, I kind of keep myself in this box. And when I think about it, this is just replaying trauma from my own childhood. I had a narcissistic mother I have a narcissistic mother. I just haven't spoken to her in 6 years, who really only allowed me, she pushed me to succeed. So I couldn't ever, like, I would be an embarrassment to the family if I fell below this point. But when I shined too brightly, I was in danger of outshining her. And so she always had to bring me down, pull me down, tell me it wasn't worth it, And so I was always kind of put in this box as a child, like, you need to do well, but don't do too well. And I have continued those own patterns with myself unknowingly as an adult of holding myself in this box. And so I kind of made that. So it's like my trauma and my feelings of low self-worth are triggered not only by jealousy and negative things that happen, low sales numbers, bad comments, things like that. It's alternatively and very tragically also triggered by success. And so that puts those of us who struggle with similar mental health issues in a really tough spot, because you can only succeed at such a rate and only so much before you get triggered, and you can only fall so low before you get triggered. And so you're always in this place of like walking on eggshells of like, I want to be happy and productive, but I don't want to trigger these feelings of trauma again. And so that's a lot. I know I'm going deep, you guys. Hopefully some of you are still here watching. So what can I do about it? So here's my 3 tips before we go. The first one is I am really learning to manage my mood. And I talked about this in the last NaNoWriMo, like Preptober stuff, that for me, managing my mood means trying to keep my space clean, because this is another trigger from when I was younger, that when my room was notoriously messy, my mom got really abusive with the way she would speak to me. And so if I keep my space clean, I'm less likely to hear that voice. And so cleaning up and keeping things tidy keeps my room feel fresh. It feels light. And also focusing on simple joys like water in a wine glass, or, beautiful table settings, or taking some time to go outside every single day and put my feet in the grass. Just like simple joys, simple things that I can do. A nice candle that smells really good in my room, or wearing nicer pajamas, or buying nicer sheets for my bed, getting a good amount of sleep, spending time outside in my brand new egg chair that I love so much, and reading or watching the sunset every night. Really focusing on those simple joys and letting myself be fully present in that moment of like, I love this and this makes me happy, and just expanding my capacity for that level of joy. So managing my mood with my environment and the things that I'm doing in that way, but also eating better, which is something I'm really struggling with right now, but I know is important and I'm going to be working on it. But also getting enough sleep, which, with a toddler who's in sleep regression is not always easy. But just telling my husband, like, okay, I didn't get as much sleep last night because she was up from 3 to 5 a.m. and telling him I'm going to need to rest this morning and not give myself a hard time over the productivity that's being lost, because I need my sleep in order to not fall into those negative thought patterns. Managing my behaviors. So this is the kind of thing I was talking about, where it's like if I've already had a down day where I've had a few things that have gone wrong and I'm in a sour mood, and I start to find myself doom scrolling on Facebook or Instagram, and there's just a lot of polarized political stuff, or angry things and nasty and toxic, and I just start to feel like I'm angry and I can't speak my mind, and different things like that. I'm like, okay, I need to step away, because this is starting to fall into a negative spiral for me. And so managing my behaviors of like, I know when to put that phone down and to stop looking at it, and to the point where I actually no longer even have a Facebook or Instagram Messenger on my main phone. I have a work phone that has that on it so that I can post to those apps, but then I don't use them for social scrolling anymore. And I do miss out on some news and things like that. But for my mental health, it has been better for me to have it that way, where I can't even get tempted to get onto a doom scroll on Instagram because I don't have it on my phone. That has been helpful for me too. And then third, helping to manage my mind and the way I talk to myself, and really paying attention to when I start to feel bad, like my emotions start to feel bad, then it reminds me, what am I saying to myself in my head? Because I can almost always, when I start to feel negative emotions, I can almost always trace it back to some way that I've been speaking to myself in my head that's really nasty, and I didn't even realize it because it's so habitual. And then learning to turn that around and say really nice, kind things to myself and be really nice to myself and manage my mind in that way then begins to help me to have better days. And the better I have in terms of my mental health, the less anxiety I have, the less depression that I'm facing, the less negative spirals and negative self-talk, the more productive I am 100% of the time, because part of the productivity is task clarity, that I'm really clear on what I need to get done through this system of taking my goals and breaking them down into bite-sized tasks. So I have the clarity of what needs to get done. But then I also have that big long-term goal of this is what I'm wanting to bring into my life. And the better I feel, the easier it is to get excited and get in here, pick out the tasks I'm going to do and follow through with them, and know every single thing that I'm doing is leading me toward this dream life that I want to lead. And then also that side, space of understanding that despite what my trauma tries to tell me, I do deserve that happy life. I am worthy. We all are. And increasing my capacity for that type of joy and success in my life, and really staying aware. So this was just truly from the heart. I'm sure there's so much more I could talk about here. If you have any questions about my story or my journey or how I've made my way through things, please let me know. And I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a bit of a different kind of video, but I was really, other than a couple of notes here, I was really just speaking from my heart, and I hope you felt that. And if you yourself are going through one of those hard times where you find yourself feeling hopeless, please get help, not only from the friends and family who really truly support you and that really are there for you, but also through therapy and any type of spiritual counseling or anything that you can get, life counseling, whatever is available to you or whatever you feel called to, please get that help, because, you are worthy, and whatever you're going through is not your fault. It's just hard. And I'm rooting for you. I believe in you. And I know that we can get through this together. Okay, that's all I have for you today. On Sunday, I am going to have our HB Notebook Challenge, and that will be the June challenge, up a little bit early. And also HB90 will be opening for enrollment. So I hope you'll join me this weekend. I love you guys, and I will talk to you in my next video. Bye.